Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
Episode 248. That's right. This is episode 248 of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. I am your host, Darryl W. Perry. And this number is somewhat significant, not because 248 means anything to me, but because 250 does. And 250, episode 250, will be on Wednesday, which means that's the day that I answer your questions. So, send those questions, ama@fppradio.com. And yes, today was supposed to have been episode 250, but I did not do a show on Monday. I did not do a show on Wednesday, and you can probably hear the reasons why. I still am not 100%, but it's been a week since I've done a show. I'm doing a show. And I've got a lot of stuff to cover. So basically I've got 3 shows worth of material to cram into one. But before I get into any of the stories, I have this interesting little tidbit to tell you. So about 20 to 30 minutes ago, I sat down to record the show, and I got everything up and running. The computer's running. The Audacity program is running. And I've got my news stories open, and I clicked the R button to record. That's a handy shortcut. If you use Audacity, you don't have to click the record button. You can hit the R on your keyboard. That will begin recording. The intro music starts playing. I'm jamming in my head with Jordan Page singing, "We all submit to the war machine," and then I start talking, and nothing happened. And I'm wondering what's going on. Is something wrong with my mixer? Is my wires not plugged in? So I'm checking, and then I thought, maybe the battery in the mixer died. Because even when the battery is dead, the little red light will come on when it's turned on. If there's enough juice in the battery to turn on the light, it will turn on the light and nothing else. So then I go searching, trying to find a 9-volt battery. And I finally find one, and I come and I plug the 9-volt battery into the mixer, and I try to record again, test, and nothing's happening. All right, well, maybe there's something wrong with the settings of Audacity, and I'm playing around with settings. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe it's the mixer, and I'll just try finding the USB cable that plugs right into the microphone, and I'll do that way. And I couldn't find that cable. And then I looked at the microphone and realized that the microphone was not turned on. So yes, that is sort of the culmination of how my week has gone, to where things have not really gone the way I've wanted them to, but ultimately they're going in the right direction. So episode 250 will be Wednesday. It's an Ask Me Anything episode. I will try to cram as many questions as possible into the 30-minute show. So why do I sound like I sound? Why do I sound as someone asked me on Sunday, Darryl, why do you sound like Tone Loc? Well, I was at a convention all last weekend, and I also came down with some sort of cold sort of thing. So on top of talking a lot and getting really excited as I was delivering my keynote speech on Sunday at Convention, I somehow, over the course of all of that, lost my voice, and I basically had no voice for about half of the day Sunday, even though I delivered the keynote speech. By Sunday night, by 6:30, actually by about 5:45 on Sunday, I sounded absolutely horrible. And I had a committee meeting that happens every Sunday. Told one of the people, hey, I've pretty much lost my voice. I'll just communicate via text. And so when the call started, somebody called in, Darryl, are you there? And yeah, I'm here. And she was like, yeah, you sound horrible. I was like, I know. And then on Monday, I rested my voice. Monday was the first day that FPP Radio News has been produced that I did not record the news. Thank you, Ian Freeman, for stepping up to record the news for me on Monday. And so Monday, I spoke, I believe, 2 brief conversations, and I sounded absolutely horrible. Tuesday, I felt a little bit better. I was able to record the news, but I still pretty much rested my voice all day Tuesday. Wednesday, I started feeling a little bit better, was able to, do my normal work. But again, I did not want to, lose my voice again by trying to record a radio program. So did not do that on Wednesday. Yesterday, I did Free Talk Live. I did not talk as much on Free Talk Live last night as I normally do. So if you want to listen to an episode of Free Talk Live that I'm on where I don't talk a lot, tune in to the show last night. So now that explains how I get to where I am today recording the show. Let me jump into some of the news that I have. And one of those stories is something that I vowed a little over a month ago that I was going to keep talking about as long as anything relevant came up about this, as long as there was new information to share. What am I talking about? I am talking about Barack Obama's war crime of bombing a hospital. Now, there's new information that came out. There was a investigation that was done that said that there were no armed men inside the Doctors Without Borders hospital in Kunduz, Afghanistan, when it was attacked. This basically corroborates the story from Doctors Without Borders, where they said we did not have anybody that was firing on anything from in here. So, this report or investigation corroborates that there were no armed men inside the hospital when it was attacked by the U.S. military. Add on top of that new information that says that doctors were shot by U.S. pilots fleeing the hospital. The doctors were fleeing the hospital, not the pilots. Doctors fleeing the hospital that's being bombed, and they're being shot. The doctors, as they're fleeing the hospital, are being shot by military pilots. The story from antiwar.com says that the U.S. attacked the functioning hospital on October 3rd. There were over 100 patients within. At least 30 civilians were killed, both civilian and staff members. The Pentagon has repeatedly changed their narrative for how the attack happened, but insists that it was a mistake. I don't know how you can say it's a mistake, and then later it is discovered that your pilots were shooting doctors fleeing the hospital that's being bombed. It's one of those sort of quandaries, if you will, a conundrum, to where people ask me all the time, like, if you don't like the U.S. government, why don't you leave? And the best response I ever saw was from somebody posted a meme on the Facebooks, and it said, if I leave, then I'm subject to the U.S. foreign policy. And this is what happens with U.S. foreign policy. They bomb hospitals and then kill the doctors that are trying to leave the hospital. There's more.
In 2115 New England, there are no borders, no states, and no regulations, yet never has a more peaceful and prosperous place existed. But Mr. Drake's security company has seen better days. Faced with the prospect of waning power, Mr. Drake intends to replace the anarchy of New England with a government. But at what cost? And can anyone stop him? Anarchy in New England by Joe Jarvis is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. In 1999, Darryl W. Perry began a search for traditional values, which led him down a path to the ideas of liberty. He tells the story in A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty. Of the book, Dr. Brian Sovereign says, sometimes it's funny and sometimes I think it's crazy, but it's always authentic. Find A Rebel's Journey, My Path to Liberty by Darryl W. Perry on Facebook, read reviews on Amazon, ask for A Rebel's Journey wherever books are sold, or visit arebelsjourney.com. When her plush and comfy life suddenly and unexpectedly fell apart, Brooke and her dog Cloud set out to defy the odds. If this is a man's world, as they say, living on the streets is no place for a young woman. One day she awoke in the redwood forest and realized she had become a hobo, and would ultimately come to know exactly what it means to survive. How to Be a Hobo by Brooke Willett is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Darryl W. Perry.
So let me jump into something other than talking about hospitals being bombed by the U.S. military. And before I jump into that something else, I want to make sure that I tell you about a way that you can keep your money in the free economy. That is, if you're using free market money. And if you're like me, you use Bitcoin and you promote Bitcoin as an alternative to the fiat-centric world. If so, you need Spend a Bit in your arsenal. Spend a Bit is the search engine for things you can buy with Bitcoin. Spend a Bit aggregates millions of products from thousands of Bitcoin-enabled merchants. Keep your money in the free economy. Spend a Bit. Use my affiliate link, spendabit.fppradio.com. And if you're a Bitcoin-accepting merchant, like I am, you should ask about their merchant suite to reach even more customers. spendabit.fppradio.com. So let's go from shooting doctors that are fleeing a hospital that's being bombed by the U.S. military to something that, well, I don't want to say is a little better news, but it's something that a lot of people were paying attention to earlier in the week. There was an election on Tuesday, and one of the things being voted on in Ohio was some tax and regulate scheme of cannabis that would have basically created an oligopoly. And there was another measure on the ballot in Ohio that would have nullified the oligopoly aspect and possibly nullified the entire tax and regulate, but it's unknown, and we never will know because the tax and regulate scheme wound up failing. But had the tax and regulate scheme that creates the oligopoly passed, and the ballot initiative saying you can't create oligopolies, you can't create monopolies, then it would have gone to the courts to determine whether or not people could use cannabis without threats of going to jail. And a lot of people looked at this because Ohio is considered a bellwether state, meaning that as goes Ohio, so goes the rest of the country. Meaning, specifically in regards to elections, generally the presidential candidate that wins Ohio tends to win the presidential election outright. But it's not always the case. So some people were looking at Ohio and saying if they legalize, then that's good news for the 7 states that are expected to vote on legalization next year. And again, I am only using the term legalize because that's the term that most people are using. This is not at all what I would consider to be full legalization. This is a tax and regulate scheme. Full legalization would be to where the product or the good or the service is as legal as a tomato. Tomatoes, perfectly legal. Nobody would say that it is illegal to possess a tomato. And as far as I've been able to find, the word tomato does not appear in state statute, meaning that you can buy a tomato, you can grow a tomato, you can manufacture tomato-based products. And there's no special regulations that apply to buying, selling, manufacturing, growing tomatoes. Now, certainly there's the regulations that involve just business in general, but it's not specific to tomatoes. So the tax and regulate schemes that they wind up putting in place in various places in regards to cannabis, they're tax and regulate schemes specifically for cannabis. So in Colorado and Washington, people were told the lie, we are going to regulate cannabis like wine, but they did no such thing. Because there's not limits on the amount of wine that you can buy in Colorado or Washington. There's not a limit on how many grapes you can have in Colorado or Washington. There's no limit on the number of grape plants that you can possess. There's no limit on the number of grape plants you can buy from a store that sells grape plants. There's no limit on the number of grape seeds that you can buy. So it's not regulated like wine at all, but that's the lie people were told. But again, they call it legalization. Well, there's a story from the Ohio Libertarian Party, and the Ohio Libertarian Party was actually opposed to issue number 3 that would have created this tax and regulate scheme of cannabis. So what does the Libertarian Party of Ohio say? Well, they put out a press release on Thursday saying Ohio voters rejected monopoly, not marijuana reform. The press release begins, Ohio voters rejected issue 3 because they did not want a small cartel of already rich, well-connected operators to make millions by controlling Ohioans' personal freedom and urgent medical needs. That from the chairman of the LPO. Executive Committee Chairman Bob Bridges says, quote, some of the media has this story a little bit wrong. A lot of the headlines are focusing on the pot, when for most Ohioans, the real issue was the pot of gold the investors would reap. Issue 3 was much more about who could sell cannabis than who could buy or who could use it to treat medical problems for themselves and their children. The issue 3 cartel badly misjudged the voters. They thought we would overlook the cronyism to get the cannabis. They were wrong. End quote. Ohio voters rejected issue 3 by a margin of 65 to 34, mainly because they opposed the proposed legal drug cartel created and backed by the state of Ohio, not because of opposition to ending cannabis prohibition or to allowing Ohio citizens the right to choose medical cannabis for themselves and their children. Bridges added that the polling shows strong support for legalizing cannabis among Ohio voters, that according to Quinnipiac polls just weeks before the election. However, again, they were opposed to the cronyism. The poll here that's cited shows that Ohioans favor the right to choose medical cannabis by a margin of 9-1, and that nearly half support legalizing cannabis for recreational use. But again, legalizing here probably means creating a tax and regulate structure, something that I absolutely do not support. So had I lived in Ohio, I probably would have voted yes on 3 begrudgingly and also voted yes on 2. That way, let's see what the courts decide. Let's see if the courts say you can have it, you just can't buy it legally right now. And once you are able to buy it, it will not be from this oligopoly. It will be on an actual free market. And that's sort of what has happened down in Washington, D.C., although they've not gone to the free market aspect yet. They've said, you can have it. We're not going to arrest you for having it unless you're on federal property. You can give it away. You just can't sell it. So that there are issues with, it's legal, but you can't obtain it legally. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment here on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
During the 2013 Porcupine Freedom Festival, Davi Barker presented an idea for a renegade psychological experiment. Since then, he has refined his idea and put his plan and research into writing. He explains, "We aim to show the world beyond a shadow of a doubt that power corrupts absolutely and corrupt authority deserves no obedience." Authoritarian Sociopathy is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores. Are you tired of governments murdering people around the world? Stop using their money. There is an alternative. Bitcoin is a stateless, free market, non-political currency. Bitcoin cannot be inflated or controlled by any government. By using their money, you are helping the state. Stop doing it. You have an incredible alternative available now. Learn it, use it, spread it. Get started with Bitcoin at weusecoins.com. That's weusecoins.com.
It is the year 91,001 BCE. Witness humanity's origins in Hypercronius, a classic role-playing game for Windows PCs, with a story like no other game before. A liberty-oriented experience that is not to be missed. Go to zog.ninja to get your copy of Hypercronius today. Use the code FPP to get $1 off. Hypercronius, zog.ninja, code FPP.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com.
So before I get back into the article here, the press release from the Ohio Libertarian Party, I want to make sure that I tell you about something that is perfectly legal to buy and sell. That is, until another president comes along and issues an FDR-style executive order saying you can't have gold. That is gold and silver. And let me tell you a place that you can get some gold and silver. That would be Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. For nearly 40 years, Roberts & Roberts has been a trusted source for buying and selling your precious metals like gold and silver. They also take Bitcoin for precious metal purchases and have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. Call Roberts & Roberts today for knowledgeable advice on investing and advice on buying and selling precious metals and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 800-874-9760. That's 800-874-9760, or visit them online at rrbi.co. That's rrbi.co. Bridges, that's the last name of Chairman Bob Bridges, chair of the Libertarian Party of Ohio. He says cannabis prohibition is less popular in Ohio every day, and the Libertarian Party is going to continue to help lead the fight for an end to cannabis prohibition, as we always have. He says he was very encouraged by the grassroots activism in support of Issue 3 and commended the efforts of the hundreds of activists who were sincerely working in the best interest of all Ohioans. He adds, a lot of great people, many of whom themselves are libertarians, were confused or even upset about our official opposition to Issue 3, and we worked hard to explain why. We understand why many people decided that a significant rollback of marijuana prohibition was more important than stopping crony capitalism, and we're already working on bridging together everyone who is fighting marijuana prohibition to find a better way to accomplish it as soon as possible. Bridges is also a registered lobbyist and is regarded by both Republicans and Democrats in the State House, and is spearheading an effort to get a medical cannabis bill before the legislature immediately. And this is something that New Hampshire does have. We do have therapeutic cannabis, as they call it here. However, the procedures and the processes are not easy. I looked at the application yesterday, and you have to have doctor's notes, and you have to meet some very strict criteria. And then you have to tell them which of the 4 treatment centers you will go to purchase your cannabis. The closest one to me is about an hour and a half away. And I would have to tell them, and there's two that are about the same distance, and I would have to tell them which one I want to go to, and I could only go to that specific treatment center, and that's assuming that I would actually be able to meet the residency requirement, because I don't have proof of residency, because I don't claim to be a resident of New Hampshire, so I could not get the card here in New Hampshire. Anyway, if I did get a card where I claim residency, I would not be able to purchase cannabis in New Hampshire. So there's a whole bunch of problems with New Hampshire's therapeutic cannabis, and it goes back to what I was talking about, some of the problems down in Washington, D.C., where they've kind of legalized cannabis to where you can have it, you can gift someone up to an ounce, but you cannot accept anything as a thank you or as consideration for the gift. You cannot legally buy or sell. I believe you can have a couple of plants, but again, it's incredibly limited, and if you're within a certain radius of federal properties, then you can't have anything, and it's absolutely horrible. So yes, they're saying we're not throwing you in jail for this, but you can't legally purchase, so there's still the black market aspect. And the black market is what needs to go away. It needs to go away, not just for cannabis, not just for cocaine, not just for heroin, not just for morphine, not just for fill-in-the-blank substance, for everything. There should not be a need for a black market. People should be able to legally, and when I say legally, I mean without fear of arrest, not you have to jump through all these hoops and hurdles and get our permission. No, that's not freedom. That's tyranny. When you have to ask somebody for permission to be able to do things that a free man should be able to do, you are not free. Mark Edge likes to say in regards to immigration that free people should be able to cross the borders of free countries freely. And I say that should apply to everything, that free people should be able to freely do whatever they want as long as they don't cause unjust harm to another person, and there should not be any permission slips required. There should not be all of these warning labels on stuff. If somebody wants to voluntarily put warning labels on stuff, good. That means you're doing your job of warning people about actual risk to a product. But when I go buy a ladder and there are 8 warning labels, all of them there only because federal mandates, then that's absolutely ludicrous. I saw a picture where somebody had bought a microphone, the pop filter, the mic muff, if you will, and it got shipped to them from California. There was a warning label that says the state of California knows that this product contains chemicals that cause cancer. Well, when you put warning labels on everything, people sooner or later just ignore the warning labels. So speaking of warning labels, apparently there should be a warning label on police officers that they get upset when you question them. In this case, the executive director of the Fraternal Order of Police has said that he has a surprise in store for Quentin Tarantino. What did Quentin Tarantino do to upset the police? Well, apparently he went to a police brutality awareness march or something, and then he made a movie. I have no clue what the movie is about. The movie is titled The Hateful Eight, and apparently a lot of police are upset about it. The executive director, again, of the FOP says something is in the works, but the element of surprise is the most important element. Something could happen any time between now and the debut of The Hateful Eight, and a lot of it is going to be driven by Tarantino, who is nothing if not predictable. He added that the police organization would be opportunistic. Tarantino came under attack from police groups ever since participating in a rally against police brutality. Tarantino said, quote, "I'm a human being with a conscience, and when I see murder, I cannot stand by, and I have to call out the murdered, and I have to call the murdered, and I have to call the murderers the murderers." Well, apparently people are not happy with this. They can't fathom that someone would say that police are killing people. How dare you? Well, you know what? I'm going to say this. I will close with the following sentence before reminding you to submit questions for Wednesday's Ask Me Anything, episode 250. Send those AMA at FPPradio.com. Let me close by saying, I can't breathe.